I wanted to situate this initially on where we are with Delta, because what's happening is Omicron is coming on the back of a still high rate of Delta transmission and hospitalisation. So in the first slide, what we have is the number of people testing positive for COVID in the UK, and that has been drifting upwards, not at a very rapid rate, but it has been drifting upwards. The Omicron data aren't really going to be visible in this for a few days, but they will become visible over time. Next slide, please. The number of people in the hospital with COVID in the UK has, because of the booster vaccination programme in particular, been drifting down until this point in time, with the numbers going into hospital reducing, although that's now stabilised slightly. And that's really because the boosters are particularly going to protect and are protecting people who are in the highest risk categories, as the Prime Minister has said. Next slide, please. And the number of people in the UK who are dying has again gradually been decreasing over time, but is still a daily average of 121 deaths from COVID. So we still have a significant issue with COVID, and I think anybody who speaks to anyone working in the NHS would say that is on top of an incredibly busy system. Next slide, please. In terms of our major countermeasures, of course, the biggest one, as the Prime Minister has said, is boosting. And this is steadily increasing. So we now have over a third of those who are eligible have already had a booster, and they are, by and large, the most vulnerable third. But there's still people who are in higher risk groups who have not been boosted. And, of course, we have to move down those groups. And that is going to become absolutely critical, we think, as we move on into a period when Omicron becomes significant and probably then becomes dominant. Next slide, please. And if this is just a data just to show quite how effective, with the variants we've had to date, vaccination can be. And what it compares is, in the dark lines, the hospitalisation rate in the blue-black bars in those who are unvaccinated, and in the orange bars, those who are vaccinated with 2 doses. This is largely protecting against Delta. But as you can see, at every age, a really substantial improvement in your protection. Next slide, please. So now we move on to the data on Omicron. And these are data probably people have seen versions of in media over the last few days, but I think they do need fleshing out a bit. So these are the number of people testing positive for COVID-19 in South Africa. At this point in time, the big increase in COVID in South Africa is virtually all the Omicron variant. And this is now spread all around South Africa. And as you can see, this is an incredibly steep increase in rates, and we're now seeing this translating into increases in hospitalisation. So, for example, I was talking to some of my colleagues from South Africa this afternoon, and they were saying that informal data still to be added to, but there was around about a 300% increase on hospitalisations over the last week. So some of those will have come in with Omicron, and some of them will come in as a result of Omicron. But the fact is those numbers are going up very sharply. Next slide, please. So what's happening here in the UK? Well, I'm afraid that the data here are now clear. What you can see here is the number on the left, and on the right, the percentage of cases with what's called S gene target failure. This is a marker for Omicron. Virtually all the cases now who've got this marker will have Omicron. A very small number at the bottom will not. And as you can see, whether you look at the absolute count or the percentage, this is going up incredibly fast now. And as the Prime Minister has said, this is doubling at this point in time. It may slow down, and the aim of the measures announced by the Prime Minister is to slow things down, but it's doubling currently between 2 and 3, every 2 and 3 days. That is an extraordinarily fast rate, and you therefore can get, with very small numbers to very large numbers, really quite quickly. Now, the question, obviously, people reasonably want to ask is, will this feed through to people in hospital, and how quickly? And I think I'd just like to just point out two realities. First of all, the first one is a good one. At the moment, the spread is in younger people who you would not expect to go into hospital, and it's once it starts moving up the ages and into vulnerable groups that you'll start to see that. So there will be a lag as it moves into more vulnerable groups. And then we know from previous waves, and this is not particularly surprising, that there is a delay between people becoming infected with COVID and ending up with symptoms and then with hospitalisation. So there's usually about a 2-week delay. We would therefore not expect that these cases, that the case rates in hospital will start to go up for a number of probably 2 to 3 weeks. And in that period, if you're doubling up at the speed we're talking about now, we move from very small numbers to really substantial numbers, and it will keep on doubling. And that really is the reason why these measures have been announced by the Prime Minister as agreed by ministers today.